The day I found out my wife had been carrying a secret for 15 years, I was standing in my kitchen making a cup of coffee I never finished. It was a Tuesday morning in late October. The kind of morning Dorothy used to love. Cool air coming through the window above the sink. The smell of dry leaves drifting in from the yard. I had the radio on low, some gospel station she used to hum along to, and for a brief moment, I forgot she was gone. I reached for her mug out of habit. The blue one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away. Then the doorbell rang. I want you to think about something before I go any further. Think about the person in your life who loved you the most quietly. Not the loudest. Not the one who said, "I love you," every 5 minutes. The one who just handled things without being asked, without being thanked. The one whose love you only truly understood after they were no longer there to receive yours in return. That was Dorothy Ann Calloway. If this story is touching something in you already, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you believe that some truths only surface when the time is right, hit that subscribe button and leave me a like. You're going to want to stay for all of this. My name is Theodore James Calloway. Most people call me Theo. I'm 67 years old, a retired architect, and I spent 38 years of my life building things. Office complexes, community centers, 3 churches in Mecklenburg County that I still drive past just to feel something. I built my career with my hands and my mind. I built my home on Chadwick Drive in Charlotte, North Carolina, brick by brick. Almost literally, because I was that kind of man. But the one thing I thought I had built better than anything else, my family, turned out to have a crack in the foundation I never saw coming. Dorothy and I met at Johnson C. Smith University in the fall of 1979. She was studying education. I was studying architecture. We were both 20 years old. Both from families that didn't have much but expected everything from us in the best possible way. She wore her hair natural before it was fashionable, walked like she was always slightly late to something important, and had this laugh. Lord, that laugh that made entire rooms turn around. We married in 1983. We raised 2 children in that house on Chadwick Drive. Our daughter, Renee, who is now 41 and lives in Raleigh with her husband and 2 kids. And our son Marcus Jr., what we call Junior, 38 years old, currently living in an apartment in the Noda neighborhood of Charlotte, working as a freelance audio engineer. Dorothy passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. The cruelest kind of departure. No time to prepare. No time to say the things you've been meaning to say for decades. She was 63 years old. And I have spent 4 years learning, slowly and painfully, that grief is not just about missing someone. Sometimes it's about discovering who they truly were after they can no longer explain themselves to you. The man at my door that Tuesday morning in October was not someone I recognized. He was maybe 45, wearing a charcoal gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive but not flashy. He introduced himself as Gerald Whitmore, an estate and financial attorney with offices on South Tryon Street downtown. He handed me a business card before I could say a word. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "I apologize for coming unannounced. I've been trying to reach you by phone and mail for approximately 6 weeks. I have a matter that requires your attention directly, and I believed a personal visit was appropriate given its nature. I invited him in, not because I wasn't suspicious. I was, but because something in his tone told me this was not a scam. This was a man delivering something heavy. You can tell the difference when you've been alive long enough." We sat at the dining room table, the same table where Dorothy used to grade her students' papers on Sunday evenings. I offered him coffee. He declined. He opened his briefcase, placed a manila folder on the table between us, and folded his hands on top of it before speaking. "Mr. Calloway, I was retained by your wife, Dorothy Ann Calloway, in March of 2019. She came to me with a specific request to create a legal structure that would ensure the cessation of certain financial arrangements she had been maintaining privately since approximately 2006. She asked me to document those arrangements, close the accounts involved, and deliver a full accounting to you in the event of her death. I didn't move. She passed, he continued, before we completed the full documentation. Her illness progressed faster than either of us anticipated, but she had signed the authorization and left sufficient records for me to fulfill her request posthumously. I am here today, Mr. Calloway, to deliver what she asked me to give you. He slid the folder across the table. I didn't open it immediately. I looked at him. What kind of financial arrangements? I asked. Gerald Whitmore looked at me with the measured calm of a man trained to deliver bad news without flinching. Between 2006 and 2021, your wife made 94 separate payments totaling $347,200 to cover debts, legal settlements, and personal loans incurred by your son, Marcus Calloway Jr. The kitchen radio was still playing. Some old Andre Crouch song I hadn't consciously been hearing until that exact moment. I did not say anything for a long time. To understand what that number meant, $347,200, you have to understand what Dorothy and I were working with. We were comfortable. I want to be honest about that. After 35 years in architecture, the last 12 as a senior partner at Calloway and Briggs Design Group, I had built real financial stability. We owned the house outright. We had retirement accounts. We had savings. But we were not wealthy in the way that makes $347,000 disappear without a trace. That was not nothing money. That was real money. Retirement money. Legacy money. The kind of money that, when I found out it was gone, made me recalculate everything I thought I knew about our financial picture and realize, with a cold, dawning horror, why certain things never quite added up the way they should have. The house needed a new roof in 2014. I had budgeted $22,000 from our joint savings account. Dorothy suggested we use a smaller contractor she'd found, said we could save money. I didn't question it. I trusted her judgment on those things. But now I wondered, was the savings account lower than it should have been? Was she covering something even then? In 2017, she told me the investment portfolio our financial advisor at Wells Fargo had been managing wasn't performing as well as expected. I accepted that explanation because markets fluctuate and because I was busy with a major municipal contract in Mecklenburg County, and because I trusted my wife of 34 years completely and without reservation. I was sitting at that dining room table realizing that trust, as complete and as genuine as it was, had been used as a shield, not against me, to protect me, or to protect him. I wasn't sure yet which one, and I wasn't sure which one was worse. I opened the folder. Gerald Whitmore had organized everything with the precision of a man who understood that clarity was the only mercy he could offer in a situation like this. Each payment was documented. Date, amount, destination, and in most cases, a brief notation in Dorothy's own handwriting describing the purpose. March 2006, $8,400 to a creditor called Prestige Auto Finance in Greensboro, NC. Dorothy's note. Junior's truck. He doesn't know I handled it. November 2007, $12,000 to a civil attorney named L. Patterson in Durham. Note. Tenant dispute. Junior's rental property. He can't know. September 2009, $6,750 to a collection agency called Meridian Recovery Group. Note. Credit card. He's trying. Please don't judge him. She was writing these notes to herself, or to me, or to God. I don't know. But reading them felt like opening letters that were never meant for any living person. Confessions whispered into the dark. I kept reading. By 2012, the payments had grown larger and more frequent. A $28,000 settlement to a former business partner, Junior had apparently defrauded in a failed recording studio venture in Gastonia. A $15,500 IRS payment in 2013 for back taxes Junior had ignored for 3 years. A $9,000 hospital bill in 2015 from a facility in Concord that Junior had left unpaid for 18 months. The notes began to change in tone around 2016. I've talked to him again. He promises this is the last time. Marcus Jr. asked me not to tell his father. I agreed. I pray this was right. He's trying, Theodore. I know you don't see it, but he's trying. That last one stopped me cold. She had written my name. Not his father, Theodore. As if she was already writing to me. As if she knew, even then, that I would be reading this one day, sitting at this table without her, trying to make sense of something that defied all sense. I closed the folder. I looked at Gerald Whitmore. Did my son know she was documenting this? I asked, based on the records and your wife's own notes, Mr. Calloway? No. He believed each situation was handled privately and permanently. He did not know she had retained me or that any of this had been formalized. Did he know the total? Almost certainly not. I nodded slowly. Outside, a car drove past on Chadwick Drive. Normal Tuesday morning. World turning like nothing had happened. How long have you been holding this? I asked. Since her passing 4 years ago, sir. She asked me to wait until I was certain you were ready. She left that judgment to my discretion. He paused. I felt the time had come. I need to stop here and be honest with you, because this is the part of the story where most people would expect me to say I was furious. And I want you to understand that fury was not the first thing I felt. It wasn't even the second. The first thing I felt was grief. A second grief, arriving 4 years after the first one, but somehow sharper. Because the first time I lost Dorothy, I lost her body. This time, I was losing the version of her I thought I knew. The Dorothy who told me everything, who sat across from me at this very table and looked me in the eye and said, "We're fine, Theo," when apparently, for 15 years, we had been anything but. The second thing I felt was something I don't have a precise word for. It sat somewhere between heartbreak and a strange, terrible admiration. Because whatever else Dorothy had done, however wrong it was to keep this from me, she had done it from love. A love so fierce and so misguided and so utterly hers that it had spent $347,000 trying to hold together a version of our son that may never have fully existed. The third thing I felt, and this is the one that began to harden into something else as the days passed, was anger. Not at Dorothy. Never at Dorothy. She was gone, and I had learned long ago that anger aimed at the dead destroys only the living. I was angry at my son. Junior and I had never had an easy relationship. I want to be fair about that, because fairness matters to me more than being right. He was a sensitive kid, creative, musical, always more comfortable with his mother than with me. I was a demanding father. Not cruel, but demanding. I believed in standards. I believed that a black man in America who did not hold himself to the absolute highest standard was a man who had already surrendered something precious. I pushed him hard. Maybe too hard. I've spent years sitting with that question. But there is a difference between a father who pushed too hard and a son who spent 15 years running up debts, legal bills, and financial disasters, and allowing his mother to clean up every single one of them in secret, while smiling at Sunday dinners like a man with a clean conscience. That Sunday dinner image is what I kept returning to. Because we had Sunday dinners every week in this house until Dorothy got sick. Junior would come over, sit right there at the head of that table, eat Dorothy's peach cobbler, laugh at her stories, tell me about some new project he was working on, some client he was about to sign. And all the while, his mother was moving money out of accounts, I didn't fully monitor to cover debts he had already created and promises she had already made. How do you sit across from your father and do that? How do you look the woman protecting you in the eyes at church on Sunday morning and let her carry that alone? What I did next, I did quietly, because that is the only way I know how to do anything that matters. I called my daughter Renee the night Gerald Whitmore left. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. I told her I'd had a visitor and that I needed to look into some financial matters related to her mother's estate. And I asked her if she'd noticed anything unusual over the years about how Dorothy managed money. Renee was quiet for a long time. "Daddy," she finally said, "how much do you know?" That answer told me more than any folder. "You knew?" I asked. "Not the details, not the amount. But Mama told me once, maybe 2018, that she was worried about Junior and that she'd been helping him more than you knew. She made me promise not to say anything. She said it would break you. I sat with that for a long moment. She thought it would break me, I repeated. She said you'd blame yourself for how he turned out. She didn't want that. After I hung up the phone, I sat in the dark in the living room for a long time. The same living room where we'd celebrated Renee's graduation from NCA&T in 2006. Where Junior had told us he was dropping out of community college to pursue music in 2007, where Dorothy had squeezed my hand under the armrest of the sofa and whispered, "Give him time. Theo, give him time." She'd been buying him that time, literally, with money I didn't know was leaving our accounts. I opened my laptop and pulled up our joint financial records going back to 2005. I had the access. I just never had the reason to look this closely. What I found over the next 4 hours confirmed everything in that folder and added several details even Gerald Whitmore hadn't caught. Dorothy had been meticulous. A separate savings account at First Bank opened in 2005, 3 months before the first payment to Junior's auto creditor, with my name on it but managed entirely by her. The statements had been going to a P.O. box I didn't know she had. Over 15 years, she had funneled money from our investment portfolio, from her own teacher's pension, and from a life insurance policy her mother had left her into that account, and from that account into the silence surrounding our son's failures. The account balance when she closed it in 2021, the year before she got sick, was $214. She had spent it down to almost nothing. And then she had hired a liar to make sure I found out when she was gone. I want to pause here and ask you something, because this is the moment I had to ask it of myself. What do you do when someone you love has wronged you? Not out of malice, not out of selfishness, but out of a love that simply went in the wrong direction? How do you hold both things at once? The grief of the betrayal and the grace of the intention. I'm 67 years old. I've been a member of Greater Galilee Baptist Church on Beatties Ford Road for 31 years. I've sat in those pews through funerals and bankruptcies and divorces and every kind of human wreckage, and I have always believed, I still believe, that the truth, even when it is ugly, is better than the most beautiful lie. But believing that in a pew on Sunday morning is different from living it at your kitchen table on a Tuesday in October with a manila folder full of your dead wife's confessions. I didn't call Junior that night, or the next night. I called my old friend Raymond Okafor first. Raymond is a retired CPA. We met at an Alpha Phi Alpha alumni event back in 1998, and he has been my financial advisor and trusted friend for over 20 years. I drove to his house in Huntersville on a Thursday morning with the folder and my laptop printouts, and I sat across from him in his home office while he went through everything with the careful eyes of a man who has seen financial deception in all its forms. He didn't speak for almost 20 minutes. When he finally looked up, he said, "Theo, this is not just a family matter. Depending on how some of these transactions were structured, there may be legal exposure here." "For Junior?" I asked. "Potentially. Some of these look like they may involve fraudulent misrepresentation, specifically the 2012 business settlement and the 2013 IRS situation. If Dorothy paid those under duress or misrepresentation from Marcus Jr., that changes things legally. She wasn't under duress, I said. She chose this. I understand that. But did he know she was compromising your joint assets? Because if he did, if he knowingly allowed her to draw from marital funds without your consent, that's a different conversation. I drove home from Raymond's house with something new settling in my chest. Not just grief. Not just anger. Strategy. Because I am my father's son and my father's father's son. And the men in my family did not survive what they survived by reacting. They survived by thinking, by waiting, by knowing exactly what they were holding before they laid it on the table. I was going to talk to my son. But first, I was going to know everything there was to know. I spent the next 2 weeks doing something I had never done in 38 years of fatherhood. I investigated my own son, not with hostility, with precision. The same precision I had applied to every architectural project I'd ever led, every structural analysis I'd ever signed my name to. You do not build a 14-story office complex on assumption. You test the ground first. You know what you're standing on before you commit a single beam. Raymond helped me pull together a full financial profile on Junior, going back to 2004. We used public records, court filings available through the Mecklenburg County Clerk of Superior Court database, and the documentation Dorothy had left with Gerald Whitmore. What emerged was not the portrait of a man who had hit hard times. It was the portrait of a man who had constructed an entire life on a foundation of borrowed consequence, always escaping the way of his choices because his mother had quietly removed the rubble before it could bury him. 2004. Junior borrows $14,000 from a friend named Deshaun Carter to start a DJ equipment rental business. Business folds in 8 months. Debt never repaid to Deshaun. Dorothy pays it in 2005, one find the record. Deshaun, I would later learn, never knew where the money came from. He assumed Junior had finally done the right thing. 2008. Junior signs a lease on a commercial recording space in East Charlotte for $2,200 a month. Stops paying after 4 months. Landlord files for eviction and back rent totaling $11,400. Dorothy covers it. Junior moves to a new studio space across town 6 weeks later, as if nothing happened. 2011. Junior gets into a car accident that is ruled his fault. The other driver, a 34-year-old nurse named Patricia Baines, files a civil suit for medical damages and lost wages totaling $31,000. Dorothy's records show a payment of $31,000 to an attorney's trust account in February 2012. Patricia Baines got her money. Junior never appeared in court. Dorothy made sure of that. And so it went, year after year, debt after debt. Each one absorbed into Dorothy's private accounting. Each one invisible to me. Each one leaving Junior free to wake up the next morning and try again or not try, depending on your perspective, without ever once being forced to stand in the full weight of what he had done. I am not a man who cries easily. I learned that from my own father, Charles Calloway, who worked 31 years at the Canopolis textile mill and never once complained about a single day of it. But sitting in Raymond's home office going through those records on a Friday afternoon, I felt something move through my chest that I can only describe as the sound of something structural giving way. Not breaking, just settling into a new position, permanently. What I also found, and this is the thing that turned my strategy from documentation into action, was a transaction from 2019 that was not in Gerald Whitmore's folder. In March of 2019, the same month Dorothy hired Gerald Whitmore, Jr. had borrowed $22,000 from a private lender registered in Guilford County. The loan was secured against a property. The property listed as collateral was the house on Chadwick Drive. My house. Our house. The house I had paid off in 2008 and owned free and clear. Junior had used my home as collateral for a personal loan without my knowledge or consent. Raymond found the filing buried in a Guilford County property lien search. It had been filed quietly and had not yet triggered any legal action because the loan, to my complete astonishment, had been paid off. In August 2019, 5 months after it was filed, I looked at the date of Dorothy's first payment to Gerald Whitmore. March 2019. I looked at the date she first noticed. According to her medical records, which Renee had helped me access, some of the symptoms she would later learn were pancreatic cancer. February 2020. Dorothy had discovered the lien on the house. That was why she hired the lawyer. That was the moment she understood that her son's behavior had crossed a line she could no longer quietly erase. He had used our home, the home I had built, the home she had raised her children in, the home she planned to leave her grandchildren memories of, as a financial instrument without asking either of us. And she had paid off that lien herself, quietly, without telling me. But she had also started building this folder, this record, this confession. She knew I would need to know. She just couldn't bear to be the one to tell me while she was still alive. I called Junior on a Monday morning in November and asked him to come to the house for dinner on Saturday. I told him I had some things I wanted to discuss about finalizing some of his mother's affairs. I kept my voice even, warm, even, because that is what you do when you have decided to be strategic rather than reactive. He said, "Of course, Dad. I'll be there." I cooked that Saturday. Roast chicken, collard greens, cornbread, Dorothy's recipes, from the index card box she kept in the second drawer to the left of the stove. I set the table the way she used to. Good plates, not the everyday ones. I put out the good glasses. Junior arrived at 6:15 p.m. He looked like his mother around the eyes, always had, and for a moment, standing in my doorway, I felt the full cruelty of what was about to happen. Because I loved my son. I want you to understand that clearly. Everything that followed came from love. The kind of love that refuses to participate in destruction, even when the person being destroyed is your own child. We ate dinner first. I let him talk. He told me about a new client he was working with, a gospel artist out of Concord, whose debut album he was producing. He seemed genuinely excited. He asked about Renee's kids. He helped me clear the plates without being asked. And then we sat back down at that table, and I placed Gerald Whitmore's folder in front of him. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. "What's this, Dad?" "Open it," I said. He opened it slowly. I watched his face. I have designed buildings for 35 years. And architecture taught me to read structure, to see what a thing is made of by how it responds to weight. I watched what happened to my son's face as the weight of that folder landed on him, and what I saw was not the surprise of a man encountering information for the first time. What I saw was the recognition of a man encountering a reckoning he had always known, somewhere deep and carefully ignored, was eventually coming. He turned pages slowly. He stopped at the 2019 lien document, the one on the house, and his jaw tightened in a way I had not seen since he was 12 years old, and I caught him lying about his grades. "Junior," I said, keeping my voice low and measured, "I need you to help me understand something, because I have been sitting with this for 2 weeks, and I have tried to arrive at an interpretation that doesn't require me to believe that my son knowingly allowed his mother to spend $347,000 of her retirement over 15 years and never said a word to me about it. I want you to give me a reason not to believe that." He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the clock on the mantel became the loudest thing in the room. "She offered," he finally said. "The first time she just offered. I didn't ask her to. The first time," I repeated. "Dad, the first time," I said again. "What about the 47th time? What about the 2012 settlement? What about the IRS payment? What about this? I pointed to the lien document. What about using my house? This house, Junior. The house your grandfather helped me pour the foundation of, as collateral, for a loan you never mentioned to either of us. He put his elbows on the table and pressed his hands against his face. That was a mistake, he said, voice muffled. I was going to pay it back before anyone knew. And who paid it off? I asked, though I already knew. He didn't answer. She did, I said. Your mother, who was already beginning to feel sick in ways she hadn't told either of us yet. She paid off the lien on this house so that I would never find out you had put it up. And then she hired a lawyer and spent the last year of her good health building a paper trail so that when she was gone, I would finally know the truth. The room was very quiet. She didn't want you to hate me, Junior said. His voice had changed. The performance was gone, and it had been a performance, I realized, though perhaps not entirely a conscious one. People convince themselves of things over years. They build narratives that protect them from their own reflection. She knew you'd look at me differently, and she couldn't stand that. She was right that I'd look at you differently, I said. But she was wrong to think there was something she needed to protect you from. That was the problem, Junior. That was the whole problem. She protected you from every consequence you ever earned. And I sat right here in this house not knowing it was happening. And you let us both do that. You let her sacrifice herself financially to preserve an image of you that wasn't real. And now she's gone, and I'm the one sitting here with the bill and the truth and no way to ask her why. My son started to cry. And I sat there and let him because he needed to cry and because some part of me needed to watch it. Needed to see that somewhere inside him was a man who understood the weight of what had happened, even if it had taken a folder and a reckoning to bring him to it. I did not comfort him, not yet. That wasn't the moment for comfort. Let me ask you something, because I know some of you watching this right now have been in that chair, on one side of that table or the other. Some of you have been the parent who protected too much. Some of you have been the child who accepted that protection without asking what it cost. This story isn't about villains. It's about the damage that good intentions, left unexamined, can do over 15 years in the dark. If this is landing somewhere real for you, I want you to share this with someone in your family today. And leave me a comment. Tell me, when is love actually hurting someone? I read every single one. When Junior had composed himself, I told him what came next, not as a punishment, as a structure. Because I am an architect, and I understand that the only way to build on compromised ground is to be honest about what's there and start from what is real. I had consulted with Raymond and with Gerald Whitmore both. There were two paths forward. The first path, I could pursue legal action. The unauthorized lien on the house constituted potential fraud. The fact that Dorothy had paid it off did not erase the original filing. Raymond had confirmed that an attorney could make a credible argument that Junior had engaged in financial elder exploitation, a serious charge in North Carolina, one that carried real criminal exposure. I was not going to take that path. Not because Junior deserved to escape consequence, but because Dorothy had spent 15 years and $347,200 trying to prevent my son from being destroyed by his own choices. And I was not going to honor her memory by doing the very thing she had spent her life preventing. I was not going to be the instrument of his ruin, but I was also not going to be the instrument of his continued comfort. The second path, my path, was this. Junior would sign a formal repayment agreement, drafted by Gerald Whitmore, acknowledging the full amount Dorothy had expended on his behalf. He would repay that amount to a trust account I was establishing in Dorothy's name, which would fund a scholarship at Johnson C. Smith University, her alma mater, for first-generation college students pursuing education degrees. He would make payments of $1,500 per month until the balance was retired. At his income level, that was achievable, without destroying him. But it would require him, for the first time in his adult life, to carry his own weight. He would also attend 6 months of financial counseling with a licensed advisor. Raymond had a recommendation, and he would not receive any further financial assistance from me beyond what I might choose to give Renee equally and transparently. Junior looked at me for a long time. "You're not cutting me off," he said. "No," I said. "I'm not your mother. I don't believe in cutting people off. I believe in accountability. There's a difference. And if I don't sign?" I looked at him the way my father used to look at me when the answer to a question was already in the room. "Then you'll be explaining the lien to a different kind of lawyer," I said quietly. "And I'll let the process work the way it was designed to work." He signed the agreement 2 weeks later in Gerald Whitmore's office on South Tryon Street. I wore a suit. I wanted him to understand the gravity of the occasion, because occasion and appearance matter. They always have in our family. Dorothy used to say that how you dress for a moment tells the world how seriously you take it. I took it very seriously. It has been 7 months since that October Tuesday when Gerald Whitmore rang my doorbell. Junior has made 6 consecutive monthly payments into the Dorothy Ann Calloway Scholarship Trust. I know because Raymond sends me a statement every month. And every month I read it and feel something complicated that I am still learning to name. He came to Thanksgiving at Renee's house in Raleigh. We sat at the same table. We ate the same food. Renee made Dorothy's peach cobbler from the index card recipe. And it was not quite right, but it was close enough to be painful in the best possible way. Junior and I talked. Not the way we used to talk, carefully, around the truth, but in a new way that was quieter and more honest, and in some ways better, because it was real. He told me, over sweet potato pie, that he had started working with a therapist. His own choice, I hadn't asked him to. He said he needed to understand why he had made the choices he made, why he had allowed his mother to carry what he should have been carrying, why he had never once, in 15 years, walked into this house and sat at this table and told his father the truth. "I was afraid of you," he said simply. "I know," I told him. "Not in a bad way, I didn't want to see you look at me the way I figured you would. And now?" I asked. He looked at me across the table, his mother's eyes in his father's face, and said, "Now, I'd rather have you look at me the way you actually do than the way I imagined." That was the most honest thing my son had ever said to me in 38 years. I don't know what Dorothy would have thought about how all of this unfolded. I've had that conversation with her in my mind more times than I can count, standing at the kitchen window with her blue mug in my hand, looking out at the yard where she used to plant sweet peas every spring. I think she would have been relieved. I think she would have been afraid. I think she would have told me I was too hard and too right at the same time, which was how she always described me when she was being generous. I think she would have cried and then laughed and then told me to stop being so dramatic about it. I think she would have been glad the truth finally found its way home. Dorothy Ann Calloway graduated from Johnson C. Smith University with a degree in elementary education in May of 1983. She taught 4th grade at Shamrock Gardens Elementary School in Charlotte for 27 years. She received the Mecklenburg County Teacher of the Year Award in 2004. She had 612 students over the course of her career, and I know that because I helped her count them one evening in 2010 when she was making a list for reasons I never asked about. The first Dorothy Ann Calloway Scholarship was awarded this past spring to a 19-year-old young woman named Destiny Frazier from Kannapolis, North Carolina, not far from where my father worked his entire life. Destiny wants to be an elementary school teacher. She's the first person in her family to attend a 4-year university. I attended the ceremony at Johnson C. Smith. Renee came with me. Junior came too. He had asked if he could, and I had said yes without hesitation, because that scholarship is as much his penance as it is his mother's legacy. and I wanted him to stand in the presence of what his repayment was building. When they called Destiny Fraser's name, I looked over at my son. He was applauding harder than anyone in that auditorium. I put my hand on his shoulder. That was all. No speech, no sermon. Just a father's hand on a son's shoulder in the auditorium of his mother's university, watching a girl from Canopolis walk across a stage toward a future Dorothy Ann Calloway helped make possible, even from beyond, even through pain, even through all the tangled and impossible complexity of a love that tried too hard for too long and somehow, in the end, found the right shape. Patience is not weakness. It is the longest form of strength. And the truth, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many years it spends folded up in a manila folder in a lawyer's briefcase, the truth always finds the table. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me through this entire story. Stories like this one don't get told enough. The ones where the pain is complicated, where the people who hurt you also loved you, where justice doesn't look like a courtroom, but like a scholarship ceremony in April. If this touched something in you today, please share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. Hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories. I'll see you in the next one.